So, I was on the highway, just trying to get back to my mom's place after a long week. Normal Tuesday, you know. Then, bam! Chaos. Cars swerving, people just losing it. I saw this guy, looked like he was having a seizure, then he just lunged. Not like a human lunge, more like a frog but with a hunger you could feel from across the road. He tore into this poor woman, and it wasn't a bite, it was a devouring. Her screams were cut short, replaced by this guttural tearing sound. My stomach twisted. I slammed on the brakes, tires screaming, and saw another one, then another. They were slow, but they were everywhere. People were running, but not away from them, more like into them. It was like the whole world had gone insane. I managed to swerve and get off the main road, onto this dusty country lane. The city skyline was a haze of smoke in the distance. Every town I passed was the same horror show. I saw a family, huddled in their driveway, then the dad, he just turned. His eyes went glassy, and he started gnawing on his wife's arm. Their kid was screaming, hiding behind a car. That image, that little kid's terror, it's burned into my brain. It made me feel sick, but also cold. Like a switch flipped. Survival mode, I guess. I couldn't help everyone. I couldn't even help myself if I stopped to think about it too much. The sheer, unadulterated horror of seeing people become these things, it messes with your head. You start to question everything. Are they still them? Is there anything left? I've been living out of my car for days. Scavenging. Anything I can find. Canned beans, stale crackers. I found a gas station, locked up tight. Had to break a window. Heard shuffling inside. Didn't go in. Not worth the risk. Every sound makes me jump. Every shadow looks like a threat. I met someone yesterday, a guy named Mark. Seemed okay at first, shared some water. Then he tried to take my backpack, my last bit of food. Said he was starving. I had to, well, he's not a problem anymore. That's the part that really gets you. You have to become something you're not to survive. You lose pieces of yourself along the way. This silence, this isolation, it's almost worse than them. It's a constant gnawing fear, a loneliness that seeps into your bones. What would you do if the only people left were either your enemy or someone you had to become an enemy to? It's a question that keeps me up at night, if I can even sleep. Look, if anyone's out there, if this recording somehow makes it out, please, just know I tried. This is me, trying to document what's happening. If you're listening, hit that subscribe button, maybe this helps someone else if they find this. And if you like what you're hearing, what you're seeing, leave a like. It's all I can ask. Because I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. The sun was starting to dip below the jagged horizon, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and angry orange. Elara pulled her worn jacket tighter, the chill seeping not just from the evening air but from the emptiness inside her. The sounds from the nearby town had finally faded, replaced by an unnerving silence broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant, low moans that were now as familiar as her own heartbeat. She remembered the screams, the guttural tearing, the vacant, hungry eyes of what had once been neighbors, friends, family. It had been a week since the world had fractured, a week of running, hiding, and a gnawing dread that was a constant companion. She'd seen the worst humanity could offer, and then, the absolute worst of what humanity could become. Her own reflection in the car's dusty window showed a gaunt, wild-eyed stranger, a stranger she barely recognized, yet was forced to trust above all others. The gasoline gauge was nearing empty, a ticking clock on her precarious existence. She'd found a small, dilapidated farmhouse earlier that day, hoping for supplies. The door had been ajar, splintered as if kicked in with extreme force. Inside, the scene was one of hasty abandonment, a spilled plate of uneaten food, overturned chairs. But it was the small, hand-drawn picture left on the kitchen table, a childlike rendition of a smiling family, that had truly unsettled her. It spoke of a life brutally interrupted, a normalcy shattered in an instant. She hadn't found much in terms of sustenance, just a few dusty cans of peaches and a half-empty bottle of water. The silence of the house was heavy, pregnant with the echoes of terror. Elara found herself listening for footsteps that weren't there, for whispers of hope that had long since been silenced. The sheer weight of solitude was starting to press down, a suffocating blanket. Was this it? Would she just fade away in a silent, empty house, another ghost in a world overrun? The thought was almost more terrifying than the shambling dead themselves. The gnawing emptiness was a constant companion. Elara scavenged what little remained in the house, a few dusty cans of beans, a half-empty bottle of water. Each bite felt like a victory, a small defiance against the pervasive decay. She knew she couldn't stay here. The memories were too much, and the supplies were too low. The oppressive quiet was a constant reminder of everyone she'd lost. She needed to move, to find something, anything, other than this mausoleum. Her mind, dulled by hunger and despair, began to formulate a plan. It wasn't a grand strategy, just a desperate attempt to survive. She'd heard rumors, whispers carried on the wind from survivors who had found a sanctuary further south. A place where they were rebuilding, where there was still a chance. The journey would be perilous, a gamble, but staying meant a slow, certain end. She packed the meager supplies into a worn backpack, a single blanket, a rusty kitchen knife her only weapon. Every creak of the floorboard sounded like an approaching threat, every shadow seemed to shift with unnatural life. Stepping outside was like plunging into a frozen nightmare. The air bit at her exposed skin, and the landscape was a desolate tableau of decay. Abandoned cars littered the roadside, their windows like vacant eyes staring into nothingness. The silence here was different, more alive with the potential for horror. She moved with a newfound urgency, her senses heightened, every rustle of leaves, every distant sound, sending a jolt of adrenaline through her. She avoided the main roads, sticking to the overgrown paths, a ghost herself, trying not to disturb the slumbering horrors that lurked in the ruins. Days blurred into a monotonous cycle of walking, hiding, and foraging. She encountered no one, neither living nor the shuffling dead. The isolation was a constant, gnawing ache, but it was a bearable pain compared to the alternatives. She kept her eyes on the horizon, a faint, almost imperceptible hope guiding her steps. The idea of others, of community, of a future, was the only thing keeping her moving forward. It was a fragile thread, easily broken, but she clung to it with all her might. One afternoon, as a weak sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows, she saw it. A faint plume of smoke rising in the distance. It was too regular to be natural, too distinct to be a trick of the light. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Smoke meant fire, and fire meant people. Or it could mean trouble. Her ingrained caution warred with the desperate yearning for connection. She moved closer, cautiously, her knife held ready. The smoke grew thicker, and then she heard it, a faint murmur of voices. It was real. There were people. But were they friendly? That was the question that would determine her fate. She crept forward, her breath catching in her throat, ready for whatever lay beyond the trees. I was on my way to visit my folks in Willow Creek. Just a regular Tuesday, you know. Sun was shining, birds were chirping, the whole 9 yards. Then, it started. A scream. Not a "lost my keys" scream, but a gut-wrenching, pure terror scream. I pulled over, thinking maybe a car crash or something. That's when I saw it. Across the street, a woman was, well, she was eating a man. Not like a bite of a sandwich. Like, tearing into him. And the man, he wasn't fighting back. His eyes were milky white, and he was just gone. My brain just froze. It didn't compute. Then, another scream, closer. I looked, and it was a guy I knew from the gas station, Mr. Henderson. Except he wasn't Mr. Henderson anymore. His skin was gray, his jaw hanging loose, and he was shambling towards me, making this horrible gurgling sound. I didn't think. I just slammed the car into reverse and floored it. The highway was a nightmare. Cars everywhere, abandoned, some crashed. People were running, screaming, but not away from anything. They were running towards other people, chasing them, biting them. I saw a kid, no older than 7, bite a chunk out of his mother's arm. His eyes were the same as Mr. Henderson's. Empty. I managed to get off the highway, hoping for a quiet back road. That's when I ended up in this godforsaken patch of woods. I'd been driving for hours, the radio just spitting static, no news, no answers. Just the screams and the gnashing teeth I imagined were right behind me. My gas tank is on empty now. My water bottle is down to the last few sips. The silence in the woods is almost worse than the chaos. It's the silence of anticipation, of waiting for the next horror to emerge from the trees. I can feel my own stomach twisting, not from hunger, not yet, but from pure, unadulterated fear. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sends a jolt of adrenaline through me, making my hands shake. I haven't seen another living, human soul since that highway. Just the shuffling, the groans, the things that used to be people. And the hunger in their eyes. God, the hunger. The truck's engine sputtered and died, leaving us in an unnerving silence. No, not silence. The groans were still there, closer now, a symphony of the damned surrounding the vehicle. Marco, his face pale and beaded with sweat, fumbled with the ignition again. Nothing. We were trapped. The horde shuffled into view at the edge of the woods, a tide of vacant stares and open mouths. They weren't fast, but their numbers were overwhelming. I gripped the tire iron, my knuckles white. Maya, huddled in the back, was weeping softly, a sound that tore at me more than any shriek. Marco tried the doors, but they were jammed. The metal groaned under the impact of the first few attackers who reached the truck. Shards of glass rained down as a hand smashed through the passenger side window, reaching for Maya. I reacted without thinking, swinging the tire iron with all my might. The sickening thud was followed by a guttural cry. It bought us a few precious seconds. Marco, seeing his chance, kicked open his door and scrambled out, fumbling for his own makeshift weapon, a rusty pipe. We fought our way out, a desperate, brutal dance against the encroaching dead. Each swing of the tire iron, each thrust of Marco's pipe, felt like a victory, however small. But they kept coming, their bodies resilient to our blows, their hunger an insatiable force. I saw Marco go down, overwhelmed by sheer weight. His screams were cut short, replaced by the familiar sounds of tearing flesh. My own breath hitched. I couldn't save him. Turning, I saw Maya had managed to climb onto the truck's roof, her small frame trembling. The creatures were beginning to swarm the vehicle, clawing at the metal, their eyes fixed on her. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my adrenaline. I had to get to her. I scrambled onto the truck bed, dodging a grasping hand, and pulled her down. We leaped off the other side, landing awkwardly on the dirt. The truck was a lost cause, a metal coffin filling with the hungry. We ran, Maya stumbling beside me, her hand clutched in mine. The woods offered no sanctuary, only a different kind of darkness. We could hear them behind us, the dragging footsteps, the guttural moans, a relentless pursuit. We were out of options. As we burst into a small clearing, we saw it, a gap in the trees, a faint glimmer of light suggesting an opening, perhaps even safety. But between us and that opening stood a single figure, blocking our path. It was old, impossibly old, its skin stretched taut over bone, but it moved with a strange, unnatural grace. Its eyes, however, were the most disturbing, they held a flicker of something other than the usual vacant hunger. Something, knowing. It raised a hand, not to attack, but to stop us. And then, from behind it, more figures emerged, not the shambling dead, but something else entirely, something that seemed to command them. My heart sank. We hadn't escaped. We had just found a new kind of trap. Okay, so picture this, it's me, Leo, right? I was just trying to get to the damn grocery store. You know, the usual Tuesday. Then, bam. Everything went sideways. I was on Elm Street, just a few blocks from home, and suddenly, the siren started wailing, but not the usual drill. This was different. People were screaming, but not like they dropped their ice cream. This was pure terror. I saw this woman, Mrs. Gable, you know, the one who always had her poodle. She was just gnawing on someone's arm. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, but there was this weird, vacant intensity to it all. It wasn't just mindless biting, it was deliberate, in a twisted way. My first thought was, what the hell is going on? Then I saw more. A whole crowd, a freaking mob, was just moving through the street, but they weren't walking. They were stumbling, lurching, and the sounds they made, it wasn't human. It was a guttural, wet rasping, like something was caught in their throats. I saw a guy, looked like he was in his work uniform, just rip into another person like a wild animal. The sheer gore of it, the way the flesh just tore, it was like a nightmare brought to life. My stomach churned, and I felt this wave of nausea wash over me. My legs were shaking, but I couldn't just stand there. I ducked into an alleyway, my heart pounding like a drum against my ribs. The sheer helplessness hit me then. What do you even do? You can't reason with them. You can't fight them all. I saw a kid, maybe 7 or 8, get tackled by one of those things. The kid's scream was cut short, a sickening gurgle. That image is burned into my brain. It made me feel so small, so utterly insignificant. The world I knew, the one with traffic jams and annoying neighbors, was gone. Replaced by this meat grinder. I had to get out. I had to survive. But how? Every shadow looked like a threat, every sound made me jump. I was already so alone. My phone had no signal. No one to call. Just me and this creeping dread. I managed to slip out of the alley and into a back street, trying to stay in the shadows. The silence was almost worse than the screams, a heavy, suffocating blanket punctuated by the distant groans of those things. I stumbled upon a deserted convenience store. The glass was smashed, but the shelves were mostly intact. A faint smell of stale chips and something, worse, lingered in the air. I needed water. I needed anything. But the thought of what might be inside, or what might be waiting just outside, made my palms sweat. Trust was already a luxury I couldn't afford. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but running where? Into more of this hell. My mind was a mess, cycling through panic and a desperate, primal urge to just keep moving, to find a place that wasn't this. The air was thick, cloying, and the smell intensified. It wasn't just stale chips anymore, it was decay, a subtle but persistent rot that clung to everything. My throat felt like sandpaper. I scanned the immediate surroundings again, my eyes darting between shadows and vague shapes that might have been anything. The instinct to flee was powerful, a physical ache in my legs, but the thought of what lay beyond these grimy walls was just as terrifying. There had to be a way through, a path that didn't lead back to where I'd come from, or further into this unknown. I took a tentative step forward, my boot scuffing against something gritty on the floor. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the oppressive silence. Every creak, every rustle, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I pushed open a door, its hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the darkness was almost complete, but a sliver of moonlight found its way through a crack in a boarded-up window. It illuminated a small, barren room. A broken cot lay against one wall, its mattress ripped and stained. A rusted metal bucket sat in the corner. Nothing useful. Nothing to drink. The stench was weaker here, suggesting this place hadn't been occupied for a long time. I moved cautiously, running my hands along the walls, searching for any sign of an exit, any weakness in the structure. My fingers brushed against something cold and slick. I recoiled, my breath catching in my throat, but it was just dampness seeping through the concrete. Then, a faint sound. A scraping, distant, but distinct. It was coming from further down the corridor, the one I'd just left. It wasn't a natural sound, not wind or settling building. It sounded deliberate. My mind immediately went to whatever had made the initial smell, whatever had driven me to seek refuge here in the first place. The urge to hide was overwhelming, but there was nowhere to go. This small room was a dead end. I flattened myself against the far wall, straining my ears. The scraping stopped. The silence that followed was worse, charged with anticipation. I took a deep, shaky breath. The stale air did little to quench my thirst, but it was better than the choking humidity outside. I needed to find water, and fast. Surviving this place, whatever this was, required more than just hiding. It required sustenance. My gaze fell on the bucket in the corner. It was empty, but the rust on its rim looked fresh. Perhaps, I thought, there was a chance. A long shot, but a chance nonetheless. I moved towards it, my movements slow and deliberate, my eyes still fixed on the doorway, expecting something to lunge out of the gloom. My hands trembled as I reached for the bucket. The metal was cold and rough. I tilted it, just in case, but it remained stubbornly empty. Disappointment washed over me, sharp and unwelcome. I was about to toss it aside when I noticed something. A small, dark stain on the inside bottom of the bucket, almost completely dried. It looked like liquid. Dried. As if something had been in there recently, and then evaporated. Or been consumed. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. Whatever was out there, it was clearly resourceful. And very, very hungry. I had to keep moving. As I clutched the empty bucket, the chilling realization of what I'd discovered settled deep in my bones. That stain, a silent testament to a recent, desperate act, spoke volumes. It wasn't just about finding an empty container, it was about understanding the sheer, unyielding drive of whatever lurked beyond these walls. It confirmed the gnawing suspicion that our sanctuary was far from secure, and that survival demanded a constant state of vigilance. The world outside had become a canvas of relentless hunger, and we were merely fleeting moments of sustenance. This was no longer a theoretical threat, it was a tangible, terrifying reality that demanded action. The memory of the flickering lights and the hushed, fearful whispers of those I'd left behind fueled my resolve. Each story, each narrow escape recounted around dying embers, had painted a vivid picture of a world irrevocably changed. From the desperate scramble for canned goods in abandoned supermarkets, where the echo of a dropped can could be a death knell, to the tense quiet of a makeshift shelter, listening to the shuffling sounds just beyond a thin barrier of wood and hope, these experiences had forged a new understanding of resilience. We were not just fighting for ourselves, but for the very idea of a future, however dim it might seem. And so, I continue to move, the weight of that discovery a constant companion. The principles I've learned, the hard-won lessons of the past, are more valuable than any weapon. Always have a backup plan, and never, ever underestimate the resourcefulness of desperation. A simple, overlooked detail, like that dried stain, can be the key to understanding a threat, or finding a solution. Remember to always carry a multi-tool, its utility in unexpected situations can be truly life-saving. More importantly, in the face of overwhelming adversity, panic is the greatest enemy. Take a deep breath, assess your surroundings, and focus on the immediate, actionable steps. Calm clarity is your most potent weapon. Thank you for joining me on this journey, for bearing witness to these tales of survival. As you go forward, remember that preparedness is not an option, but a necessity. Stay aware, stay adaptable, and above all, stay calm. Your ability to think clearly in the most dire circumstances will define your path. Please, if these stories have resonated with you, consider subscribing and sharing your own thoughts in the comments. Your engagement is vital, and together, we can navigate this uncertain future.